The night sky over Earth was beautiful right up until it caught fire. For the people of New York, it began as a strange, dazzling aurora that painted the clouds in colors no one had ever seen. People took out their phones, recorded videos, shared them with the world. For 3 full seconds, billions of humans stared upward in awe. And then the light turned white. It was as if a second sun had been born overhead. Every camera, every satellite, every sensor on the planet went blind at once. The air itself seemed to ripple with heat as a single, silent lance of energy carved through the atmosphere. The beam touched Manhattan first. Buildings didn't fall, they vaporized. In less than a heartbeat, a city of 8 million was reduced to a burning crater. The shockwave came next, flattening everything for miles in every direction. Those who survived the flash were thrown into walls, into streets, into the air itself. Similar beams hit Shanghai, Paris, Lagos, Rio de Janeiro, and Mumbai. All within the span of 30 seconds. It was not a warning. It was a message. General Samuel Hayes regained consciousness in near darkness. His ears rang like a siren, and every breath was like inhaling smoke and metal dust. The war room, once a gleaming nerve center beneath the Pentagon, was now a wreck. Half the screens were shattered, debris littered the floor, and somewhere nearby, water sprayed in a steady hiss from a ruptured pipe. Hayes pushed himself up, wincing as pain lanced through his chest. Something was wrong with his ribs, but he ignored it. His soldiers were scattered across the floor, some moving, some not. Status. Hayes barked, his voice hoarse. Major Alyssa Grant was the first to respond. She staggered to her feet, blood running down the side of her temple, clutching a half-shattered data tablet. General. Ike, she swallowed hard, staring at the screen. Multiple cities hit. Global death toll, her voice faltered. We don't even have numbers yet. It's. Focus, Major. Hayes's tone snapped her back. Grant nodded shakily. It was one strike, sir. Origin point, above geosynchronous orbit. Not a meteor. Not a natural event. It was deliberate. The room went silent. Not because no one understood, but because they all did. Hayes forced himself upright, gripping the edge of the main console. Bring up the satellite feed, he ordered. A lone surviving weather satellite came online. Static filled half the screen, but through the distortion, they saw it, something black, massive, blocking out the stars. Its silhouette was sharp, unnatural, unmistakably constructed. A ship. They came, Hayes muttered, his voice barely a whisper. And they didn't come to talk. 3 days passed. The fires still burned in what was left of the cities. Storm systems raged across the oceans, fed by the heat of impact. The sky had taken on a faint, permanent haze, dimming the sun. And then, the broadcast came. Every surviving screen on the planet flickered to life at once, phones, televisions, billboards, even the dead satellites suddenly transmitting again. The creature that appeared was not human. Its body was armored in glistening black plates, its head narrow and insect-like, its mouth full of clicking mandibles. Its voice was not spoken but transmitted, translated into every language at once. This world has been weighed. Your species is escalating beyond permissible conflict capacity. You are unstable. Dangerous. You will submit or be extinguished. You have 48 hours to decide. And then the screen went black. The message repeated every hour. Beneath the mountains of Colorado, President Emily Vance convened what remained of her cabinet inside one of the last functioning command centers. The air smelled of burnt wiring and sweat, the hum of emergency generators filling the silence. They didn't come here to negotiate, the president said, her face pale but her voice steady. They came to deliver a sentence. We can't win a war against a fleet that can fire from orbit with impunity, said Dr. Noah Raines, head of strategic defense. His hands shook as he placed a folder of data on the table. They took out every missile silo, every launch pad, every piece of the orbital defense grid in the first strike. We don't even have satellites left to track their movements. Then we stopped playing defense, General Hayes said, his voice a low growl. Every eye turned toward him. Hayes stood slowly, wincing at his ribs but ignoring the pain. "We finished the Ares program." Rains looked as if he'd been slapped. "That was buried for a reason. It's unstable. It was never meant to be used outside of a theoretical deterrence scenario." "This is a deterrence scenario," Hayes snapped. "They burned half our cities in a single night. If we sit here and wait, they'll finish the job." Ares was built for exactly this planetary-scale retaliation. President Vance's gaze was unreadable as she weighed the options. "Ares hasn't been touched in 30 years, she said quietly. "Do you even know if it still works?" Hayes looked her dead in the eyes. "It will. Because it has to." For a long moment, the room was silent. The faint rumble of distant earthquakes, the aftershocks of the orbital strikes, was the only sound. Finally, the president gave a single, sharp nod. "Then bring it back online." The next morning, Hayes and Major Grant boarded a black transport plane headed west, bound for Nevada. The desert air was choked with dust, the sky a dim orange. Far below, they passed refugee convoys heading toward the mountains, people fleeing what was left of Los Angeles, San Diego, and Phoenix, knowing those cities would be next. "Do you really think this will work?" Grant asked, her voice quiet enough to be almost drowned by the engines. Hayes didn't answer right away. He stared out the window at the fractured landscape, the burning horizon. "It doesn't matter what I think," he said finally. "It's the only card we have left." Deep beneath a decommissioned mountain facility, behind blast doors that hadn't been opened since the Cold War, Project Ares waited. The facility smelled of dust and machine oil, its cavernous launch bays silent and cold. Engineers in dusty hazard suits swarmed over consoles, reconnecting power lines, rerouting ancient circuits, coaxing dead systems back to life. One by one, the lights on the control board began to glow. Major Grant stood at the railing overlooking the core chamber, her heart pounding as she watched. "I read about this project in training," she said quietly. "They said it was the most dangerous weapon ever conceived. Tungsten rods the size of city buses. Dropped from orbit at terminal velocity." Hayes nodded, his expression grim. "They called them rods from God. Kinetic strikes with no warning, no defense. We mothballed them when we decided to be better than this." He turned to face her, his jaw set like iron. "Looks like we were wrong." Outside, the alien ships shifted position in orbit, their silhouettes briefly eclipsing the sun. The 48 hours were almost up. And this time, when the sky burned, it would not be only humanity's cities that turned to ash. The desert sky was a dim, angry orange by the time Project Ares came fully online. Deep under the Nevada mountains, the command center thrummed with life for the first time in 3 decades. Massive monitors flickered to full power, displaying orbital trajectories and telemetry data. The room smelled of hot circuitry and ozone as generators fed power to the ancient system. Technicians barked status reports over the DIN satellite grid, 90% responsive, 2 still offline. Launch rails at 75% charge. Targeting software manual only, automation is shot. "Then we go manual," General Hayes said. His voice cut through the chaos like a blade. Major Alyssa Grant stood at his side, her uniform sweat-stained, her face pale but resolute. "If we fire these things, there's no going back," she said quietly. Hayes didn't look at her. His eyes stayed fixed on the holographic projection of Earth and the black shapes circling it like vultures. "There was no going back the moment they burned New York," he replied. Above them, the alien ships adjusted their orbits. The projections showed their formation tightening, their weapons facing Earth. They weren't hiding anymore. They were preparing for the final strike. Dr. Noah Rain stood behind a console, nervously twisting the strap of his headset. "Ares was meant to deter rival nations," he said. "Not to start an interstellar war. Once we fire, it will hit back with everything they have left." Hayes turned to face him. "You think they haven't already? This isn't a war we can de-escalate, Doctor. It's a war we either end or lose." Rain swallowed hard and said nothing more. All over the planet, humanity waited. Radio stations played nothing but static-laced emergency bulletins. Whole towns gathered around whatever screens still worked, watching the countdown clock tick closer to zero. Children huddled in basements clutching stuffed animals, while their parents pretended not to cry. Soldiers stood at checkpoints, scanning the skies, knowing their rifles were useless against what waited overhead. And in the mountain bunker, Hayes stood over the master console, his finger hovering near the firing authorization. Grant's voice was low, almost a whisper. "General, if we miss?" "We won't," Hayes said flatly. But his jaw was tight, and his hand trembled almost imperceptibly. The alien transmission came earlier than expected. Every screen in the bunker flared to life, bathing the room in pale blue light. The insectoid creature appeared again, its black carapace gleaming. Its compound eyes glittered with something like contempt. "Your time has expired. Your refusal is noted. Cleansing strike will commence." The message cut out. Then the sky outside the mountain lit up as the alien ships charged their weapons. Energy buildup on all primary targets, a technician shouted. "They're going to fire. Lock Ares targeting." Hayes bellowed. The room erupted into motion. Grant's fingers flew over the console, locking coordinates onto the largest 3 ships in orbit, their command vessels. "Targeting set," she shouted. "Fire," Hayes said. High above the Earth, 12 Ares satellites opened their magnetic clamps. With a hiss of venting gas, tungsten rods each 20 feet long and weighing 12 tons were released into the void. Small thrusters ignited, nudging them into precise re-entry angles. Then gravity took over. To anyone watching from the surface, they appeared as silent, falling stars, dozens of them, cutting fiery trails across the night sky. The first strike hit with the force of a small asteroid. An alien warship simply ceased to exist, crushed under a kinetic impact traveling at Mach 10. The fireball lit the night sky over the Pacific, and a moment later, a deafening sonic boom rolled across half the planet. "Direct hit!" Grant shouted, her voice almost drowned out by the roar of the cheering control room. Another rod struck home. A second ship erupted into a blinding explosion, scattering debris across the stratosphere. The alien formation broke. "They're trying to scatter," a technician called out. "Keep firing," Hayes ordered. One by one, the rods fell like divine hammers, each strike shaking the planet as much as it shook the alien fleet. One ship after another went dark, tumbling toward Earth in flaming fragments. But 3 of the largest remained. Their shields burned white-hot, but they held. And now, they were returning fire. Incoming! The mountain bunker shuddered as a beam struck a nearby ridge, turning granite into a molten river. Dust rained from the ceiling, and several technicians were thrown from their chairs. 2 of the satellites just went offline. Rains shouted. "We're losing launch capacity. Reroute targeting through the remaining grid," Hayes barked. Grant's fingers danced over the keys, sweat running down her face. "I can keep 3 launchers active, but after that, we're dry." "Then make them count," Hayes said. In orbit, the alien ships moved like predators circling prey. One unleashed a pulse weapon that knocked another satellite spinning off course, rendering it useless. Grant cursed under her breath. "We're running out of options, sir." Hayes's gaze fixed on the last functioning satellite. Its payload wasn't just a tungsten rod. It was the Hammer, an experimental projectile twice as massive, designed to punch through hardened bunkers. It had never been tested outside of simulations. "Load the Hammer," Hayes said quietly. Rains turned to him, eyes wide. "That thing's unstable. If it fragments on re-entry, we could scatter molten metal across half the hemisphere." Hayes didn't blink. Better molten metal than extinction. For a moment, the command center was silent, every eye on Hayes. Then Grant nodded. "Targeting the command ship." Outside, the alien fleet charged for a final strike. The horizon lit with eerie brilliance as their weapon arrays powered up, beams coalescing into lances of annihilation aimed straight at Earth. In the bunker, the countdown for the Hammer ticked down. "Launch in 10 seconds, Grant reported. Her voice was calm, but her hands were white-knuckled on the console. Hayes stepped forward and took hold of the manual firing switch. The room fell utterly silent. He thought of the burning cities, the smoke still rising from the ruins of Manhattan. He thought of the billions hiding in shelters, waiting for death. He thought of what it meant to be human, resilient, defiant, impossible to break. And when the timer hit 0, he pulled the trigger. Far above, the hammer was released. Its thrusters fired for just a fraction of a second, aligning its course perfectly before gravity took over. It fell. It screamed through the atmosphere like a comet, its tungsten surface glowing white-hot, leaving a trail of plasma that stretched for miles. The alien command ship's shields flared as it braced for impact. And then the hammer struck. The resulting detonation turned the night sky into a false dawn. The shockwave rippled through the upper atmosphere, visible from every corner of the planet. When the light faded, the alien command ship was gone. But the other two were still there, and now they were furious. "Brace for retaliatory fire," Grant shouted. The mountain shuddered as another alien beam struck the outer defenses, this one closer, powerful enough to melt rock. "They're targeting the control center directly," Rains yelled. Hayes's jaw tightened. "Then we finish this before they do." The first retaliatory blast struck 10 miles from the bunker. Even that far away, the ground heaved like an earthquake, throwing men and women from their stations. Lights flickered, alarms screamed, and ceiling panels rained down in showers of dust. Major Alyssa Grant slammed into a console and barely managed to stay on her feet. "Direct hit on Ridge 2, she shouted over the cacophony. "Outer communications array is gone. Damage report." General Hayes barked, gripping the railing to stay upright. "Structural integrity holding," a technician reported, his voice shaking. "But another strike that close will breach the access tunnels." Dr. Rains wiped blood from a cut across his forehead. "They're not trying to burn the planet anymore," he said grimly. "They're hunting us. They know where Ares is." Hayes's jaw clenched. "Then we take them down before they take us." On the screen, the surviving 2 alien warships loomed like executioners. Their formation tightened, their weapons arrays glowing as they powered for another barrage. Grant worked frantically at her console, rerouting control to the last surviving satellites. "We have just 2 launch rails left, sir," she said, breathless. "After that, Ares is dry." Hayes glanced at the projections. The ships were still moving, weaving to make targeting solutions harder. "This is going to have to be manual," he said. "Bring up the optical feed." The screen shifted to a live camera view, 2 black silhouettes gliding against the curve of Earth, their hulls glinting with cold light. Grant's voice was tight. "Manual guidance online." Hayes gripped the targeting controls with both hands. His ribs screamed in protest, but he forced himself steady. "Lock the first rail on the closer ship." "Locked." "Fire." High above the Earth, another tungsten rod was released. It fell through the atmosphere, trailing a burning wake, and slammed into the alien vessel's flank. The shield flared brilliant white, then shattered. The impact tore through the ship's midsection, shearing it nearly in half. The warship spun wildly, venting fire and molten debris as it tumbled into a lower orbit. A second later, it broke apart entirely, its remains burning like a meteor shower. The control room erupted with cheers. "One down," Grant shouted. But the victory was short-lived. "Incoming," a technician cried. The final alien ship fired. The beam struck the mountain directly this time. The whole world seemed to lurch. Consoles exploded in sparks, sending operators sprawling. The lights went out for a full 3 seconds before emergency power kicked in, bathing the room in blood-red glow. "Access Tunnel 3 is gone," another tech shouted. Secondary generators hit, switching to final backup. Hayes wiped dust from his eyes, coughing from the acrid smoke filling the room. "Do we still have control of the last launcher?" Grant checked her readout. "Yes, but its payload is..." She stopped, glancing at him. "The prototype?" Hayes guessed. Grant nodded grimly. "It's the last hammer. No failsafes, no guidance redundancy. If we miss, that's it. No more shots. Hayes's gaze went to the screen. The last alien warship was aligning for a kill shot, its entire forward section glowing with energy. We don't have a choice, he said quietly. Dr. Rains stepped forward, his face pale. General, if the hammer's trajectory drifts even slightly, it could impact in the wrong hemisphere. We could cause a planetary-level catastrophe. Hayes turned to him, his expression like carved stone. Doctor, the catastrophe is already here. That ship fires again, and this bunker and the last chance Earth has are gone. We fire. The room went dead silent. Grant's hands hovered over the arming sequence. Targeting command ship, she said, her voice barely above a whisper. Manual trajectory input required. Hayes gripped the targeting controls once more, staring at the ship's image. His breath was steady now. There was no more hesitation. No fear. Only resolve. Do it, he said. The bunker went quiet except for the steady beeping of the countdown. Outside, the alien vessel's weapon arrays flared as it prepared its final shot. The ground shook from the energy buildup, as if the entire planet was holding its breath. Hayes's fingers tightened around the firing switch. In that frozen moment, he thought of every city reduced to ash, every screaming voice on emergency broadcasts, every child hiding in a shelter and waiting for the sky to fall. He thought of the first time he had taken an oath to defend Earth. And when the countdown reached 0, he pulled the trigger. The hammer launched. Unlike the rods before it, this was no simple drop. Its thrusters ignited for a full second, hurling it into the atmosphere with a speed that turned night into day. The air itself ignited around it as it fell, creating a trail of plasma so bright it was seen from orbit. In the command center, everyone stood frozen, watching the trajectory readout. Impact in 5 seconds, Grant said softly. 4. 3. The alien ship fired its own beam, lancing down toward Earth. 2. The hammer struck. The explosion was brighter than dawn. For a full 5 seconds, the sky became a blinding sphere of white light. The alien command ship disintegrated, its hull vaporizing under the sheer force of the kinetic impact. The shockwave rippled through space and atmosphere alike, knocking out every remaining alien drone and weapon platform. When the light faded, the sky was empty. The command center sat in stunned silence. No one moved. No one breathed. Then a single voice broke the stillness, all alien signatures gone, a technician reported, her voice trembling. Orbit is clear. A ragged cheer went up. Then another. Soon, the bunker erupted into a roar of triumph, the sound echoing off the concrete walls. Grant sank into a chair, burying her face in her hands. We actually did it, she whispered. Dr. Rains laughed once, almost hysterically, before leaning against the wall as if the strength had gone out of him. Dear God, he said softly. We just won. Hayes didn't cheer. He stood at the edge of the console, staring at the empty sky on the main screen. Finally, he said, send a message. To who? Grant asked, still catching her breath. To anyone still listening, Hayes said. His voice was calm now, steady as bedrock. Tell them humanity pulled the last shot. Around the world, people stepped out of bunkers and shelters and looked up. The night sky glowed faintly with falling debris, fragments of the fleet burning in the atmosphere like 1,000 falling stars. For the first time in weeks, there was no fear in those faces. Only awe. Humanity had stood at the edge of extinction and had not knelt. They had taken the first shot. And now, they had delivered the last.